The massive space station hung in the darkness like a metal city. Taemin pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship and watched the structure grow larger. He had never seen anything so big. The station was home to the Galactic Council, where 16 different alien species made decisions that affected billions of lives across the galaxy. His hands were sweating inside his diplomatic gloves. Earth had chosen him to represent humanity at this emergency meeting, and he felt the weight of that responsibility. Behind him, his aide Jin'e was reading reports on her tablet, her face serious. "The other species have been here for hundreds of years," Jin'e said quietly. "Some of them think humans are too young to have a real voice in galactic politics." Taemin nodded. Humanity had only achieved faster-than-light travel 10 years ago. Compared to civilizations that had been exploring space for thousands of years, humans were like children trying to sit at the adult table. The transport ship docked with a soft thud. Taemin straightened his formal diplomatic suit and checked his appearance one last time. His black hair was neatly combed, and his face showed calm confidence even though his stomach was full of butterflies. The airlock opened with a hiss. Taemin stepped onto the station and immediately felt overwhelmed. The corridor was huge, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows above. Strange lights pulsed along the walls in patterns that made no sense to human eyes. The air smelled different too, carrying scents from a dozen different worlds. Other delegates walked past him and Taemin tried not to stare. A tall, thin creature made of what looked like living crystal moved by with musical sounds coming from its body. Behind it, a group of squid-like beings floated in mobile water tanks, their tentacles waving as they talked in bubble-filled voices. "Ambassador, Taemin?" A mechanical voice spoke behind him. He turned to see a robot that looked like a walking metal spider. Its voice came from speakers in its head, and red lights blinked where eyes might be. "I am Guide Unit 7. I will show you to the council chamber." Taemin followed the robot through corridors that seemed to go on forever. Along the way, he saw more amazing sights. Gardens with plants that glowed in the dark. Windows showing the starfield outside with alien ships coming and going like busy insects. Meeting rooms were being so strange that Taemin could not even guess what they were discussed matters, in languages that sounded like music, or grinding metal, or wind through caves. "The emergency session begins in 30 minutes. Guide Unit 7 explained as they walked. "The topic is the return of the Devourers." Taemin had read about the Devourers in the files Earth had given him, but the information was limited. They were some kind of ancient enemy that appeared every 1,000 years to destroy worlds. Most of the records about them were old legends that different species told in different ways. The council chamber was a huge dome with seats arranged in circles going down toward the center. Each section was designed for a different type of alien life. Some seats were filled with water for the aquatic species. Others glowed with different types of light. Some areas had different atmospheric conditions, visible as shimmering barriers. In the air, Taemin found the human section, which was small and located near the back. The message was clear. Humans were new here and not very important. He sat down and looked around at the incredible diversity of life that filled the chamber. Jin'e took the seat next to him and leaned over to whisper. "The Vorthak delegation is in the crystal section over there. They're one of the oldest species on the council. The floating jellyfish things are the ethereals. They can read minds, so be careful what you think around them." Before Taemin could ask more questions, a deep sound like a bell filled the chamber. All conversation stopped. A being that looked like a tree made of silver metal walked to the center of the room. Its voice was like wind through metal branches. "Council members, we face a crisis that threatens all life in the galaxy. 3 worlds have been completely destroyed in the past month. The Kalari homeworld, the mining colony of Zirion 5, the trade hub at Junction Point, all consumed, leaving nothing behind but empty space and debris." Images appeared in the air above the speaker, showing the destruction. Taemin felt sick as he watched entire planets being torn apart by machines that looked like mechanical spiders the size of cities. The Devourers moved through space in huge swarms, stripping everything useful from worlds and leaving dead rock behind. The pattern matches the old records, the tree being continued. The devourers have awakened from their 1,000-year sleep. They will not stop until they have consumed everything in their path, or until they are destroyed. The chamber erupted, in worried voices speaking in dozens of languages. Some delegates were shouting, others were making sounds like singing or drumming. The jellyfish-like ethereals glowed brighter and moved in quick, nervous patterns. A creature that looked like a giant praying mantis stood up in one section. Its voice was like clicking metal. The defense fleet must mobilize immediately. We need barriers around our most important worlds. Barriers will not stop them, replied a being made of flowing liquid metal. The old records say they can break through any defense given enough time. We should evacuate the rim worlds and consolidate our populations in the core systems. Evacuation will take too long, argued a crystalline creature whose voice was like breaking glass. We should attempt communication. Perhaps they can be reasoned with. Taemin listened to the debate and felt a growing sense of concern. These were supposed to be the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, but they sounded confused and scared. Some wanted to hide behind walls, others wanted to run away. A few thought they could talk to machines that had just destroyed 3 worlds, without any attempt at communication. Hours passed and the arguments grew more heated. Species blamed each other for not sharing technology that might help. Old territorial disputes were brought up as reasons why certain battle plans would not work. The beautiful diversity of the council chamber had become a source of division, rather than strength. Finally, the silver tree being called for a recess. Delegates began filing out, their voices showing frustration and fear. Taemin sat in his chair, thinking about what he had heard and what it meant for humanity. A tall crystal being approached the human section. Its body was made of clear, singing crystal, and lights moved through it like colored water. This was Crystal Singer Thex, one of the most powerful beings on the council. Human representative, the being said, its voice like wind chimes in a storm. Perhaps your species should consider evacuation now, before you witness what real warfare looks like. Your primitive technology will be useless against the devourers. The crystal being walked away without waiting for an answer. Janae started to stand up, angry at the insult, but Taemin put a hand on her arm to stop her. Let it go, he said quietly. We have more important things to worry about. But as he watched the alien delegates leave the chamber in their small groups arguing and complaining, Taemin began to wonder if the galaxy's great civilizations had forgotten something important about survival. Something that humanity, in its short and violent history, had never had the luxury of forgetting. The devourers were coming, and the galaxy's response was to build walls, run away, or try to negotiate. None of those options sounded like they would work against an enemy that existed only to consume and destroy. Taemin stood up and straightened his jacket. Tomorrow the council would meet again, and the real debates would begin. He needed to be ready. Taemin stood in his small quarters aboard the station, looking out at the stars while a video call connected him to Earth. The delay was only a few seconds thanks to quantum communication technology, but those seconds felt like hours when discussing the fate of humanity. The screen flickered to life, showing 2 familiar faces. General Dong-hyun sat at a metal desk in the Earth Defense Command Center, his uniform crisp despite the late hour. Next to him was President Yoon-ji, her expression serious as she leaned forward to hear the report. How bad is it? General Dong-hyun asked without greeting. Worse than we thought, Taemin replied. The devourers aren't just raiders or conquerors. They're like a forest fire that moves from star to star. 3 worlds are already gone, completely consumed. Not conquered, not occupied. Gone. President Yoon-ji frowned. What are the other species planning to do? That's the problem. They can't agree on anything. The Vorthak want to build giant shields around planets. The Delphians want to retreat to water worlds where the Devourers supposedly don't go. The Ethereals think they can use mind control, but the Devourers are machines. Machines don't think like living beings, General Dong-hyun said, his military experience showing. You can't negotiate with them or scare them or make them change their minds. They just follow their programming. Taemin nodded. That's what worries me. These alien civilizations have been peaceful for so long that they've forgotten how to fight a real war. They think like diplomats and scientists, not soldiers. The OR call continued for another hour as they discussed Earth's preparations. Humanity's space fleet was tiny compared to the galactic powers, but every ship was being armed and every person with military experience was being called back to service. It might not be enough, but humans had learned long ago that sometimes you fight even when you can't win. After ending the call, Taemin found Jin-A in the station's diplomatic restaurant. The room was designed to serve food from 16 different worlds, so the air was full of strange smells and the sounds of various eating habits. Jin-A sat at a table designed for humans, reading reports on her tablet while picking at a plate of something that looked like blue rice. "Any useful intelligence?" Taemin asked as he sat down. Jin-A slid the tablet across to him. "Attack patterns, energy signatures, ship designs. The Devourers move in swarms of about 50 to 100 vessels. They arrive in a system, spread out to consume everything useful, then move on. The whole process takes about 2 weeks per world." Taemin studied the data. The Devourer ships were massive, covered in weapons, and equipped with giant mechanical arms for tearing apart planets. But there was something else in the patterns that caught his attention. "They're efficient," he said after a moment. "Look at these attack routes. They're not random. The Devourers choose the path that lets them consume the most resources with the least energy spent. They're following some kind of cost-benefit analysis. Is that good or bad? It means they can be predicted. And if they can be predicted, they can be trapped." Later that evening, Taemin attended a diplomatic reception in one of the station's many social areas. The room was huge, with different environmental sections for different species. He made his way through the crowd, listening to conversations, and trying to understand how the galactic community really worked. He found himself talking to drone speaker 9 Alpha, a representative of the Hive Collective. The being looked like a cross between a human and a giant ant, with 4 arms and large compound eyes. Despite its strange appearance, it spoke in perfect, emotionless tones. "Your species is new to galactic politics," 9 Alpha said, its voice carrying no judgment, just fact. "You have not experienced the benefits of civilized warfare." "What do you mean by civilized warfare?" Taemin asked. "Conflicts resolved through economic pressure, technological superiority, or diplomatic negotiation. The collective has not engaged in physical combat for over 300 years. When disputes arise, they are settled by panels of judges or through trade agreements." Taemin felt a chill run down his spine. "What about when someone doesn't want to negotiate?" "That rarely happens among civilized species. The costs of actual warfare are too high and the benefits too uncertain. It is much more efficient to compete through other means." Across the room, Taemin spotted Flowmaster Kef, one of the Delphian representatives. The aquatic being floated in a tank of water that moved with him on mechanical legs. Taemin excused himself from 9 Alpha and made his way over. "Ambassador Taemin," Kef gurgled through the water, his tentacles waving in what might have been a greeting. "I have read about your species' history. So much conflict, so much destruction. How do you maintain social stability with such violent tendencies?" The question stung, but Taemin kept his expression neutral. "We've learned to channel those tendencies toward protecting what we care about. Our last major war was the Jakarta crisis 15 years ago. It taught us some hard lessons." "What kind of lessons?" Taemin paused, remembering. He had been a young military officer then, part of the coalition that faced an enemy with superior numbers and technology. They had won, but only by using tactics that their opponents couldn't predict or counter. "We learned that sometimes the only way to win is to fight differently than your enemy expects. They had better weapons and more soldiers, so we didn't fight them directly. We made them come to us on ground we chose using methods they hadn't prepared for." Kef's large eyes blinked slowly. "But surely negotiation would have been preferable. War always causes unnecessary suffering." "The enemy wasn't interested in negotiation. They wanted to eliminate us completely. Sometimes you have to choose between fighting and dying." As the evening continued, Taemin had similar conversations with representatives from other species. The pattern became clear. The galaxy's great civilizations had become so advanced and peaceful that they had forgotten the basic mathematics of survival. They thought in terms of minimizing losses, not achieving victory. They planned for acceptable casualties, not for total war. Back in his quarters, Tai Min video called Earth again. This time he spoke to his old commanding officer from the Jakarta crisis, Colonel Hyun-soo, who was now an admiral in the Earth Defense Force. Tai Min, good to see you, Admiral Hyun-soo said, his weathered face showing the strain of preparing Earth's defenses. How are our galactic neighbors handling the crisis? They're not, Tai Min said bluntly. They're thinking like prey animals. All their plans involve hiding, running, or trying to negotiate with machines. They've forgotten how to be predators. Admiral Hyun-soo was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. The Jakarta crisis taught us that sometimes civilization is a luxury you can't afford. When your existence is threatened, you have to be willing to do whatever it takes to survive. The aliens have rules for everything. Civilized warfare, proportional response, minimizing casualties. They're going to try to fight the Devourers like it's some kind of sporting event with referees. And the Devourers? The Devourers are going to fight like Devourers. They'll consume everything in their path without hesitation, mercy, or restraint, unless someone stops them. After ending the call, Tai Min stood at his window looking out at the galaxy. Somewhere out there, the Devourer swarms were moving from star to star, leaving empty space behind them. The great civilizations of the galaxy were preparing their defenses and planning their retreats. But maybe, just maybe, there was another option. Something that these advanced, peaceful species had forgotten in their centuries of civilized warfare and diplomatic solutions. Jinai knocked on his door and entered without waiting for permission, as was her habit. The council reconvenes tomorrow. Morning, she said. Intelligence reports that the Devourers have consumed 2 more worlds. They're moving faster than expected. Tai Min turned from the window. Jinai, what would you do if someone threatened to destroy Earth? She didn't hesitate. Fight them with everything we have. Use every weapon, every trick, every advantage. Win at any cost. Even if it meant breaking the rules of civilized warfare? There are no rules when someone wants to wipe out your entire species. Tai Min smiled grimly. That's what I thought you'd say. And that's exactly what these alien civilizations can't understand. They've been civilized for so long that they've forgotten how to be savage. Outside his window, the stars continued to shine, but Tai Min knew that some of those lights would go dark soon if the galaxy didn't learn to fight like its survival depended on it. Because it did. The emergency alert woke Tai Min from a restless sleep. Red lights flashed in his quarters while a mechanical voice announced in several languages that all council delegates should report to the main chamber immediately. He dressed quickly and found Jinai already waiting in the corridor, her face pale. What happened? He asked as they hurried through the station's halls. Farron 7, she said, her voice tight. The Devourers hit the industrial world 4 hours ago. The defense fleet tried to stop them. Tried. Jinai's tablet showed video feeds from the battle. Tai Min watched in horror as the galaxy's most advanced warships fired their weapons at the Devourer swarm. Their energy beams and plasma cannons lit up space like a deadly fireworks show, but the machine ships kept coming. Their hulls absorbed the attacks or deflected them harmlessly into space. The defense fleet ships were beautiful works of art and engineering. Their hulls curved in elegant lines, their weapons were precisely calibrated, and their movements showed the skill of crews, who had trained for decades, but they fought like they were in a simulation, keeping proper distances and following tactical manuals written for wars between civilized species. The Devourers fought like hungry animals. They swarmed over the defense fleet ships, ignoring losses, and focusing only on getting close enough to use their massive cutting tools. Within 2 hours, half the galactic fleet was destroyed or disabled. The survivors retreated while the Devourer swarm descended on Farron 7 like locusts. The council chamber was in chaos when Tai Min and Jinai arrived. Delegates shouted at each other in languages that sounded like music, static, and grinding metal. Some of the more emotional species were making sounds that could only be described as wailing or screaming. Crystal singer Thex stood in the center of the chamber, its crystalline body flashing with angry red lights. The defense fleet followed all proper engagement protocols, it announced in its wind chime voice. The failure was not in tactics, but in the enemy's refusal to follow the conventions of civilized warfare. Taman almost laughed. The Devourers had refused to follow conventions. They were machines whose only purpose was to consume everything in their path. Expecting them to fight fair was like expecting a hurricane to apologize for the damage it caused. Flowmaster Kef raised one of his tentacles to speak. Perhaps we should attempt communication again. The machines must have some kind of intelligence, controlling them. If we can reach their central command system. They are not interested in talking, interrupted a new voice. Everyone turned to look at the source, a being that looked like a walking tree made of black metal. This was Shadowroot Vex of the Tech Priests of Axiom, a species that had turned themselves into machines thousands of years ago. If anyone understood the Devourers, it would be them. I have analyzed the combat data, Shadowroot Vex continued, its voice like grinding gears. The Devourers operate on pure efficiency algorithms. They consume resources to build more of themselves, then use those resources to consume more resources. There is no consciousness to negotiate with, no emotions to appeal to. They are entropy given form. Then what do you suggest? Asked Drone Speaker 9 Alpha. Evacuation. All organic life should retreat to the galactic core and establish defensive positions around a small number of heavily fortified worlds. We can preserve our civilizations while the Devourers consume the outer regions. The chamber erupted again. Some delegates supported the evacuation plan while others argued that abandoning entire sectors of space was unacceptable. A few suggested using planet-killer weapons to destroy worlds before the Devourers could consume them, denying the machines their resources. Taman listened to the debate with growing frustration. These beings were still thinking like politicians and bureaucrats instead of soldiers. They wanted solutions that were clean, moral, and didn't require them to make hard choices. Finally, he stood up in the human section. The chamber was so large that his movement barely registered, but Jenny activated the human delegation's speaking system, and Timon's voice was amplified throughout the dome. "Council members," he said, "I request permission to address the assembly." The chamber fell silent. Crystal Singer Thex's body flashed with what might have been surprise or annoyance. "The human representative wishes to speak? Your species has no significant military contribution to offer." Several delegates made sounds of agreement. The jellyfish-like ethereals pulsed with colors that Ginny's tablet translated as amusement. The Vorthak delegation sang a brief melody that the translation system rendered as presumptuous children. But Shadowroot Vex spoke up in Taman's defense. "The humans have extensive experience with warfare. Their historical records show continuous military conflicts for thousands of years. Perhaps their perspective would be valuable." Crystal Singer. Vex hesitated, then gestured with one of its crystal branches. "Very well. The human may speak, but briefly." Taman walked down to the center of the chamber, feeling the weight of hundreds of alien eyes upon him. The delegation seats rose up around him like the walls of a coliseum, and he was the gladiator about to face the lions. "Honorable delegates," he began, "you have spent the last 6 hours debating evacuation plans, communication attempts, and defensive strategies. These are all reasonable responses to a military threat." He paused and looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many different species as possible. But the Devourers are not a military threat. They are an extinction event. The chamber stirred. Some delegates leaned forward to hear better, while others made sounds of skepticism. "Your defense fleet followed proper combat protocols when they engaged the enemy. They maintained appropriate distances, used precision targeting, and attempted to minimize their own casualties. These are the tactics of a civilized military force." Taman activated his own presentation system, showing the battle footage from Farron 7. The Devourers did not follow protocols. They accepted massive casualties to close distance with your ships. They ignored precision targeting and simply overwhelmed your defenses with numbers. They didn't try to minimize anything. They maximized destruction. The images showed Devourer, ships ramming into galactic vessels, detonating their own power cores to damage multiple targets and using debris from destroyed ships as weapons against the survivors. You are fighting them like they are another civilized species, like they care about casualties or efficiency or the rules of engagement. But they don't. They only care about consuming everything in their path. Flowmaster Kef's tentacles waved in agitation. What alternative do you propose? Should we abandon all principles of civilized warfare and become barbarians? Taemin looked directly at the aquatic alien. Yes. The single word fell into the chamber like a stone into still water. The ripples of shock spread through the assembly as delegates processed what the human had just said. The Devourers are not civilized, Taemin continued. They are a force of nature, like a plague or a natural disaster. You cannot negotiate with a tsunami. You cannot reason with an earthquake. You can only prepare for it, fight it, and do whatever it takes to survive it. He gestured to the images still showing above the chamber. Your beautiful ships, your precise weapons, your trained crews. They are all designed for wars between rational opponents who want to win battles and achieve political goals. The Devourers don't want to win. They want to consume everything. Crystal Singer Thex's body flashed with angry colors. And what does humanity propose? That we abandon millennia of progress and return to primitive savagery? Taemin smiled, and something in that expression made several delegates step back. We propose that you learn what humans have never forgotten, he said quietly. Sometimes the only way to save civilization is to be willing to destroy it. Sometimes the only way to preserve life is to be ready to throw it away. Sometimes the only way to win is to fight like you have nothing left to lose. He looked around the chamber one more time. Because you don't. The silence stretched for long moments before Crystal Singer Thex spoke again. What exactly are you suggesting? Give me 3 days, Taemin said. Let me show you what human tactics look like. Let me show you how to fight an enemy that doesn't care about rules, casualties, or civilization. And if your primitive methods fail, Taemin's smile grew wider and more dangerous. Then we all die anyway. But at least we die fighting like predators, instead of hiding like prey. The chamber erupted in arguments, but Taemin noticed something different this time. Instead of the panicked sounds of earlier debates, some delegates were making thoughtful noises. The martial species were showing interest, while even some of the peaceful ones seemed to be considering his words. Crystal Singer Thex raised its branches for silence. The council will consider the human proposal. We will reconvene tomorrow to hear the details of these primitive tactics. As delegates began to file out, Shadowroot Vex approached the human section. Your species has an interesting perspective on warfare, the mechanical being said. I look forward to seeing how you plan to fight entropy with chaos. Taemin nodded. Chaos is exactly what we're going to give them. The council chamber had never been so quiet. Every delegate sat in perfect silence as Taemin walked to the center of the floor. 3 days had passed since his first challenge to the assembly, and those 3 days had changed everything. 2. More worlds had fallen to the Devourers while the galactic leadership debated evacuation routes and defensive strategies. Taemin looked up at the circular tiers of alien representatives. Some watched him with curiosity, others with skepticism, and a few with barely concealed hostility. But all of them were listening. The failure of conventional tactics at Farron 7 had shaken their confidence in everything they thought they knew about warfare. He activated the holographic display system, and images of the Devourer fleets appeared above the chamber. But these weren't the same tactical analyses the Council had been studying for weeks. These were different patterns, different data points, different ways of understanding the enemy. Honorable delegates, Taemin began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. For the past month, you have been asking the wrong questions about the Devourers. The images changed to show attack patterns and resource consumption. Rates, you ask. How can we stop them? How can we defend our worlds? How can we minimize casualties? These are the questions that prey asks when faced with a predator. Crystal Singer Thex's crystalline body flashed with impatient colors. And what questions should we be asking, human? Taemin's expression grew hard. How do we kill them all? The chamber stirred uneasily. Several delegates made sounds of protest, but Taemin continued before they could voice their objections. Have been thinking about this conflict like it's a territorial dispute or a trade war. You expect negotiations, compromises, and reasonable solutions. But the Devourers are not a civilization. They are not a species. They are a weapon that someone built to destroy everything in its path. He gestured to the holographic displays, which now showed detailed breakdowns of Devourer ship construction and behavioral patterns. My aide Jin-A and I have spent 3 days analyzing every piece of data from every encounter with the Devourers in galactic history, and we found something that your military analyst missed. Jin-A stood up in the human section, her own presentation system activating. The Devourers follow predictable patterns because they operate on efficiency algorithms. They always choose the path that gives them the most resources for the least energy expenditure. They're not creative. They're not adaptive. They're just very, very good at following their programming. New images appeared showing resource distribution maps and projected attack routes. This means they can be manipulated, Taemin said. If you make certain targets more attractive than others, they will prioritize those targets. If you make their efficient paths more difficult, they will seek alternative routes. They're predictable because they're machines. Flowmaster Kef's tentacles waved in agitation. Even if this is true, how does it help us? Our most powerful weapons barely damage their hulls at Farron 7. Taemin smiled, and several delegates who had been watching him carefully recognized the expression as dangerous, because you were trying to fight them fairly. The chamber erupted in confused voices. Taemin waited for them to quiet down before continuing. Your defense fleet engaged the Devourers in open space at optimal weapons range, using standard tactical formations. You gave them every advantage. You fought them the way they expected to be fought. The holographic display changed again, this time showing a detailed tactical proposal that made several military delegates lean forward with interest. Humans call this asymmetrical warfare, Taemin explained. When your enemy is stronger, you don't meet them in a fair fight. You make the fight unfair in your favor. Shadow Root Vex spoke up from the Tech Priest section. Explain. The Devourers are efficient, but efficiency requires predictability. They follow programmed behaviors that worked against previous galactic civilizations. But those civilizations all fought the same way, with honor, with rules, with attempts to minimize casualties and preserve resources. Jin-A activated another presentation showing human military history. Humans have fought wars for survival for thousands of years. We learned that when your existence is threatened, there are no rules. There is only victory or extinction. The images showed battles from Earth's history, where smaller, weaker forces had defeated larger, more powerful enemies through unconventional tactics, ambushes, and strategies that violated every principle of civilized warfare. We propose Operation Chaos Theory, Taemin announced. The name appeared in holographic letters above the chamber while tactical diagrams began displaying around it. Instead of meeting the Devourers in direct combat, we hit their resource-gathering operations. Instead of protecting our worlds with static defenses, we make them too expensive to attack. Instead of preserving our ships and crews, we use them as weapons. Drone Speaker 9 Alpha's mechanical voice carried clearly across the chamber. Clarification requested. You propose using military vessels as weapons rather than platforms for weapons? Exactly, Taemin replied. The Devourers expect you to value your ships and try to preserve them. They don't expect you to pack a cruiser full of explosives and ram it into their command vessels at maximum velocity. The chamber fell silent except for the sounds of various species breathing, water circulation, and mechanical cooling systems. Mind Shaper, Yeth of the Ethereal Collective, pulsed with colors that the translation system rendered as horror. You propose deliberate destruction of military assets. This is wasteful madness. Is it more wasteful than losing entire worlds? Taemin countered. Your defense fleet at Farron 7 followed every rule of engagement and lost half their ships anyway. At least our way. Those ships would have taken some Devourers with them. Crystal Singer Thex's body flashed through several color patterns before settling on a deep, angry red. Even if such barbaric tactics could succeed, the cost in lives and resources would be enormous. Civilized species do not fight wars of mutual annihilation. Taman walked closer to the Vorthak delegation section, looking up at the towering crystal being. "Crystal Singer Thex," he said formally, "may I ask how many wars your species has fought in the last 1,000 years?" The Vorthak have not engaged in armed conflict for over 800 years. We resolve disputes through diplomatic channels and judicial processes. And the Ethereals? Taman turned to Mindshaper Yath. "How many wars?" "The collective has not fought a physical war for 600 years. Mental conflicts can be resolved without destruction of material assets." Taman looked around the chamber. Delphians? Hive Collective? Tech priests? One by one, the alien delegates admitted that their species had not fought real wars for centuries. Some had not seen combat for over 1,000 years. Their militaries existed mainly for ceremony and to maintain order within their own territories. "That's what I thought," Taman said quietly. "You've all forgotten what real warfare looks like. You think it's about precision and efficiency and minimizing casualties. But sometimes war isn't about winning battles. Sometimes it's about making the enemy pay such a high price for victory that they decide the fight isn't worth it." He gestured to the tactical displays still floating above the chamber. The Devourers operate on cost-benefit algorithms. They attack targets that give them resources without costing too much energy. But what happens when every target costs them more than they gain? What happens when every world they try to consume becomes a trap? What happens when their efficient, predictable behavior becomes a weakness instead of a strength? Flowmaster. Kef's large eyes blinked slowly. "You propose to make the galaxy too expensive for them to consume?" "Exactly. We turn every world into a fortress. We mine every space lane with explosives. We pack civilian ships with weapons and send them on suicide runs against Devourer fleets. We make them fight for every meter of space, every asteroid, every drop of water." The chamber was quiet again as delegates processed this concept. "And when they adapt their tactics?" asked Shadowroot Vex. Taman's smile grew wider and more predatory. "Then we adapt faster. That's what humans do. We improvise, we overcome, we survive. We've been doing it for our entire evolutionary history." He looked around the chamber one more time. "The Devourers are coming whether you like it or not. They will consume everything in their path unless someone stops them. Your choice is simple. Fight them like civilized beings and watch your worlds burn, or fight them like humans and maybe, just maybe, save everything you care about." Crystal Singer Thex was quiet for a long moment, its crystalline body cycling through several color patterns. "And if we agree to this madness?" it asked finally. "What then?" Taman straightened his diplomatic jacket and looked the towering alien directly in what might have been its eyes. "Then, honored delegates, the time for war has come." The words fell into the chamber like stones into deep water. For a moment, no one spoke. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. Then Shadowroot Vex stood up in the Tech Priest section, its mechanical voice carrying clearly through the silence. "The Tech Priests of Axiom vote to implement the human proposal." One by one, other delegates began to stand, some reluctantly, others with growing conviction, but all of them making the same terrible, necessary choice. When the final vote was counted, the Helix Nebula had been chosen as humanity's proving ground for one simple reason. It was expendable. The ancient gas cloud contained 3 dying stars, a handful of worthless asteroids, and absolutely nothing that any civilized species would miss if it were destroyed. Captain Sok Jin stood on the bridge of the human destroyer Inchan's Pride, watching the mixed fleet of human and alien vessels take their positions around the nebula. 3 weeks had passed since the Galactic Council's fateful vote, and those weeks had transformed the galaxy's approach to warfare. The ships spread out before him looked nothing like the elegant vessels that had fought at Farron 7. The Vorthak cruisers had been stripped of their beautiful crystal decorations and packed with mining explosives. Delphian waterships now carried crude ramming prows instead of precision energy weapons. Even the graceful ethereal mine ships had been fitted with kinetic bombardment systems that violated every principle of their peaceful philosophy. "Captain," his communications officer called out, "Admiral Hyan Su is requesting final status reports from all units." Jin activated his command display and reviewed the tactical situation. The Devourer swarm was 3 hours away, following exactly the path that human analysts had predicted. 57 machine ships were approaching the nebula to harvest the rare gases that formed around dying stars. It was supposed to be a simple resource-gathering operation. Instead, it would be their first lesson in human warfare. All units, this is Admiral Hyan-Su aboard the Soul's Vengeance. The voice came through clearly on all channels. Today we show the galaxy what it means to fight for survival. Remember, there are no rules except victory. The plan was simple enough to be elegant and complex enough to be deadly. The Devourer ships would enter the nebula expecting minimal resistance, perhaps a few automated defense platforms or warning beacons. Instead, they would find the entire nebula turned into a trap. Captain Minho commanded a squadron of converted civilian ships hidden inside the nebula's gas clouds. His vessels looked like ordinary mining equipment and cargo haulers, the kind of targets that Devourers usually ignored until after dealing with military threats. But each ship was packed with enough explosives to damage a Devourer command vessel. "Movement on the sensors," reported the tactical officer. "Devourer swarm entering the outer edge of the nebula." Through the bridge viewports, Jin could see the enemy ships as tiny points of light against the swirling colors of the gas cloud. They moved in their typical efficient formation, larger vessels in the center with smaller craft spread out to maximize resource collection. "They're following the predicted pattern," Ginny reported from her position at the intelligence station. She had insisted on joining the fleet operation, claiming that diplomatic observers needed to witness the results of their proposals firsthand. The first phase of the trap activated automatically. Hidden throughout the nebula were thousands of small devices that looked like natural gas pockets or mineral deposits. As the Devourer ships moved deeper into the cloud, their sensors detected these false resources and adjusted course to collect them. "They're taking the bait," Jin muttered, watching the enemy formation spread out as individual ships pursued different targets. The second phase began when the Devourers reached the center of the nebula. What they found there was not the expected concentration of harvestable materials, but something that had never appeared in their tactical databases: a human mining station that had been converted into a weapon. Dr. So Young had spent weeks working with alien scientists to create the perfect trap. The station appeared to be a normal industrial facility processing rare gases from the nebula. In reality, it was a massive bomb designed to look like a target worth consuming. "Devourers are moving to assault the mining station," reported the tactical officer. "They're committing their primary vessels to the attack." This was the crucial moment. If the Devourers had learned from previous encounters, they might recognize the trap. But their programming demanded efficiency above all else, and the station represented exactly the kind of high-value industrial target they were designed to prioritize. "All units prepare for Phase 3. Admiral Hyan-Su's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. "Captain Minho, you are authorized to begin your attack run." Inside the nebula, Captain Minho watched the Devourer command ships move into position around the mining station. His converted cargo ships had been drifting with the gas currents for hours, looking like debris or abandoned vessels. Now they came alive with engine flares as they accelerated toward their targets. The Devourers detected the movement immediately, but their tactical algorithms classified the approaching ships as low-priority threats. Civilian vessels posed no significant danger to their armor and weapon systems. The machines continued their assault on the mining station, while sending only minimal forces to deal with the apparent refugees or scavengers. That mistake cost them everything. Minho's lead ship, a converted grain hauler packed with antimatter charges, struck the primary Devourer command vessel at 90% of light speed. The explosion lit up the entire nebula like a newborn star. 2 more civilian ships followed, ramming into the enemy formation before the machines could adjust their threat assessments. Direct hits on 3 command vessels, the tactical officer reported, his voice filled with amazement. "Devourer formation is breaking up." But the real surprise was yet to come. As the Devourer ships scattered to deal with the unexpected attack, they triggered the third phase of the trap. Dr. So Young had turned the mining station itself into a weapon, rigging its industrial processors to overload in a chain reaction that would tear apart anything within 100 kilometers. The explosion was visible from the outer edge of the solar system. When the light faded, 17 Devourer ships had been completely destroyed, and another 20 were severely damaged. The survivors fled the nebula in patterns that their programming had never anticipated. Retreat. Impossible, whispered Jin-A, staring at the tactical display. The Devourers are running away. Admiral Hyun-Soo's voice came through the communications system, calm and professional despite the magnitude of what they had just achieved. All units pursue the fleeing Devourers. Do not allow them to escape and report our tactics to their main fleet. The pursuit lasted another 6 hours as human and alien ships hunted down the damaged Devourer vessels throughout the star system. It was not the kind of clean, efficient victory that galactic civilizations usually achieved. It was brutal, messy, and it cost them 30% of their attacking force. But when the battle was over, 57 Devourer ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of metallic debris. Captain Seok-jin stood in the observation deck of his ship, looking out at the wreckage scattered throughout the Helix Nebula. Next to him, Jin-A was recording her observations for the report she would give to the Galactic Council. "The casualties," she said quietly. Captain Min-ho and his entire squadron. 3 Vorthak cruisers, 2 Delphian waterships, over 4,000 personnel. "I know," Seok-jin replied. "But how many people lived on the worlds the Devourers consumed? How many more will die if we don't stop them?" Jin-A nodded slowly. She had seen the aftermath of Devourer attacks, entire planets stripped bare, billions of lives simply gone. The mathematics of the situation were brutal but clear. Losing thousands to save billions was not just acceptable, it was necessary. A communication came in from Admiral Hyun-Soo. "All vessels, prepare for jump to rendezvous coordinates. Intelligence reports indicate the main Devourer fleet is adjusting its tactics in response to our attack. We need to be ready for their next move." 3 days later, Taemin stood once, again before the Galactic Council. But this time the chamber was different. The delegates sat straighter in their seats, their attention focused with laser-like intensity on the human representative. The casual dismissal and barely concealed. Contempt of previous sessions had been replaced by something else. Respect, and perhaps a touch of fear. "The Battle of the Helix Nebula was a complete success," Taemin reported. 57 Devourer ships destroyed, with minimal losses to our forces. More importantly, we have proof that the Devourers can be defeated using asymmetrical tactics. Crystal Singer. Thex's crystalline body flashed with colors that the translation system identified as amazement and concern. The casualty reports indicate that 30% of the attacking force was lost. By what measure is this minimal losses? By the measure of survival, Taemin replied simply. In conventional warfare, you try to minimize casualties while achieving limited objectives. In survival warfare, you accept casualties to achieve total victory. Every ship we lost at Helix Nebula was a ship that died fighting instead of running. Activated his presentation system, showing intelligence data gathered from the battle's aftermath. The Devourers' behavior has changed. Their fleet movements show increased caution, longer reconnaissance periods, and most importantly, they're avoiding targets that appear too well defended. They're adapting to the new threat environment we've created. Mindshaper Yeth pulsed, with skeptical colors. This adaptation suggests they will become more difficult to trap in future engagements. Exactly, Taemin agreed, which is why we need to keep adapting faster than they can.